Hello, and welcome back to Call Your Coven, practical advice for nonsensical times. I am one of your hosts, Bee, your resident numerologist, and my pronouns are she, her.
I'm Jeanna, your resident astrologer, and my pronouns are also she, her.
And I'm Meg, your resident tarot reader, and my pronouns are she, they.
We've moved away from card slinger. We're just
Yeah, it felt weird, and then I made a whole weird thing about it, and I was like, I'm just gonna commit to tarot reader.
we love
We'll see.
it. Very
Just gonna keep
straightforward.
you on your toes here.
Yes, well, welcome back. Happy November. There's a lot to celebrate today. The end of eclipse season. We just moved through the Samhain portal. It's a new moon if you're listening on the 1st. So we're finally back into like workable energy. And I'm sure Jeanna will let us know all about how we can move forward. She's shrugging, so maybe not.
We're gonna find out. We're gonna find out for sure. It's workable energy, but the world is mad. So,
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's pretty clear in all of what we've prepared to say to you today, lovely Coven. And in case you haven't listened or you're not caught up, we did have a jam-packed October. We dropped our episodes weekly. So thank you so much for listening. If you're still catching up, that's totally okay. Make sure you're subscribed. And of course, since sharing is caring, please feel free to send this episode to your witchy bestie. And just a reminder that along with our solo episodes, Jeanna and I also just released an episode about the upcoming election in the United States. We did not make any predictions. We were just looking at the energies of the day itself and the charts of the major party candidates, as well as sharing practical self-care tips and some really nerdy but really interesting patterns throughout presidential history. So if that's your vibe, you can listen now. And of course, we're just sending a ton of love, protection, and comfort to everyone as we move through this. Yeah. But today we'll be chatting about November through the lens of numerology, astrology, and the tarot. So I will kick things off unless either of you have anything to add to our lovely Coven at the top.
Yeah, let's get into it.
Yeah, let's go.
Cute. Let's do it. Okay. We are in November. It is the 11th month of the year, the penultimate month of 2024, which is wild to me. And now, obviously, we are going to talk about the number 11 today, which is the first of the repeating numbers that we all love to see out in the world. But when added to our yearly cycle of 8 and reduced to a single digit, November's core ruling number is 1. And it's also the second month in a row that we're working with the number 1 being reduced from 10, which was our little backpack friend. And that resonated with quite a few people. It was really fun to see that in comments and feedback. But here in November, okay, so we have 11, which is our ruling number for November, always the month, and then we have this core ruling number of 1, and then this year we actually do get a sneaky third number of the month, because with 11 you can choose to look at it from its root number, which 1 plus 1 is 2. So we have 1, 2, and 11. So we'll get to 11, I promise, but in a nutshell, 1 is the self. It's the start and the spark. And then 2 is the other, the next. It's love and relationships. It rules kindness and compassion, which I think are all really key qualities to keep in mind, especially as those of us in the United States move through this election cycle. Kindness, compassion, diplomacy, just everything's crossed. But in November, I do feel like we're really being given the opportunity to connect with or reconnect with these parts of ourselves that we may have lost touch with, either this year or maybe in a larger cycle, or that we haven't yet been bold enough to step into. So last month in October, we talked a lot about endings and beginnings and kind of that messy space in between them. And so this feels like a little bit of a fresh start, like a breath of fresh air, or like a thank goddess, I finally feel fill in the blank, whatever you're feeling again. But even with the inclusion of 11, this is really super tender work. So it feels juicy and exciting, but also we're moving through the beginning phases of something. So we're just taking baby steps. We're being really kind to ourselves. If we're not the self that we wish to see in the world, which is a big theme that came through that I will talk about in a second. If you don't feel like that right up front, it's just being gentle and slow and steady, and we'll get there. I'm really holding tight to the idea that we're in the beginning stages of the next. And where we can pull in 11 as a big helper is that 11 gives us this bird's eye perspective. It's out of the spiral of the building block numbers of 1 through 9. So it is this higher perspective, quote unquote, that can be really helpful when we're plotting things out. It's the idea that we can see the whole map. So even if we're here over here, we can see everything and we can start to connect the dots between where we are and where we want to go. And that is because 11 is the number of psychic connections. It's having one foot on the ground and then one foot beyond the veil. It's romance, it's idealism, it's seeing the bigger picture. 11 is perfection and progress, which on Earth really is kind of just the energy of pushing the envelope because perfection is never quite really attainable here. So 11 is a bit of a mind's eye, like inspirational energy, I feel. But I also have had clients tell me that they think I don't like the number 11, which
Not
is
me.
not.
I've never said that. For what it's worth. As an 11 life
Yeah.
path, I've never said that to you.
Well, I love you and your life path of 11. And maybe because I'm a life path of 8, I'm just like a
Mhm.
plebeian stuck down here and I can't get to 11 anyway. Um, but
Oh
the
my God.
reason the reason that I think some people feel I've soured on it is because the flip side of 11 and some of the things that I think we need to watch out for this month is that 11 really is also the space between reality and fantasy. So in this space, we have misinformation, we have delusion, we have cognitive dissonance, we have spiritual bypassing, all of these things that want to take us out of the present moment or somehow warp our present moment. And I do feel like that is a lot of the energy that we're already kind of swirling through, especially with Neptune and Pisces and all these other astrological happenings. And so, yeah, I'm curious to see how that plays out. So we're keeping ourselves grounded this month in November, but also open to imaginative possibilities in whatever way feels good. So again, the self is in the spotlight this month. And what really came through when I was thinking about 11 is that we all are in need of updating the versions of ourselves that we hold to our present tense self. So who are you here in November of 2024? And you can reflect back to the last equinox, the last solstice, the beginning of the year, whatever feels good to you, but really challenge yourself to update yourself to the real version of you, all the messy bits, but also all the amazing pieces that have fallen into place. And then 11 says, you can act like your favorite self. And some people say higher self or best self. I don't totally remember where I heard favorite self, but I do think I like that one the best. And a lot of practitioners now are talking about timeline jumping and this energetic way of accessing these other senses of self. And so what came through for us in November is actually really simple. It's like switching the what would Jesus do question to what would your favorite self do? So when you are at a crossroads or making a decision or thinking about how you're going to react or behave, think about what your favorite version of self would do and then do that. And then all of a sudden you are that person, right? So that's how to put 11 to good use in a way that jumpstarts new behaviors and that again, be the self you wish to see in the world was really what came through as like a tagline for the numerology of November. So before I kick it to Jeanna, I would be remiss if I did not talk about 11/11 because we're in November, a date to watch out for. So obviously every month has a date on which the numeral of the month and the day are the same. So we have January 1st, 1/1, 2/2, 10/10, 12/12. But November gets this extra special double day of 11/11 because the girlies, and I say that in a genderless way, we love to see 11/11 out there. And this year in 2024, 11/11 is actually a holiday in the US. It's Veterans Day. But beyond that, it's a really awesome date to plan a ritual or a date with yourself, especially around concepts of safety, security, and enoughness. So they're all tricky concepts, but essentially boils down to questions like what makes me feel held? What makes me feel brave? What makes me feel confident or capable? And what makes me feel like I can take up space in the world? And these questions might seem silly or futile to spend time with, especially in the face of major collective grief, right? Climate collapse, genocides, rapidly changing political unrest. But I really feel like if the future is going to take all of our attention and our action, then maybe these kinds of questions are actually the most important questions to ask ourselves, definitely on 11/11, but also throughout the month. So 11 yields to reality, but reality is ever shifting. So especially with this core number of 1, I think November is for doing what you can, not getting too bogged down in what's not possible. But again, being the self we wish to see in the world and knowing that our little actions have these big ripple effects. And just note that the collective 8 energy is not going down without a fight. So it might scream at us, or our brains might scream at us that we're not doing enough. But we are almost to 2025, which will bring a much different vibe with 9 collective energy. But there is an opportunity here in November to get a jump start on who we want to be and how we want to approach the next year. So a lot to work with here, but really just keeping our favorite versions of self in mind and then trying to embody that person as much as possible.
I love that.
That is such an interesting way to go into talking about Scorpio season because, and I guess in the sense that this is a monthly forecast, it is sort of this idea of what's happening over the course of the month. Because the idea with Scorpio is that we are confronting the depths of self in order to change, in order to get to that favorite self. But it's kind of like we have to go through this, Inanna's descent, the witch's road, whatever, like what have you, in order to get there. Like there is I don't want to say a series of trials, but like it's a crucible, it's you don't just get to the favorite self immediately. Like there's that, even if it feels short, like that in between process is astrologically where we're at. So it continues to be really interesting to see how these things like intersect with each other and build on each other, which is to say, we're starting the month in Scorpio season, obviously. And first off, I mean, before we get into like the lunations of the month and some major things that are astrologically happening, I do want to talk a little bit about the nature of Scorpio, because especially in the contemporary, like Western astrological conversation, Scorpio tends to get a really bad rap. My favorite thing to tell people is that we all have every single sign in our birth chart, and every single sign is important. Every single sign is in charge of a different area of life in the birth chart. So if you're like someone who just can't like get enough of, harping on Leos or Geminis or Scorpios, congratulations. Those are the parts of yourself that you're probably pretty uncomfortable with, which is just to say Scorpio gets a bad rap. Part of the reason Scorpio gets a bad rap is, I think, if we just like strip it down to its foundations, it kind of makes sense. Scorpio is a water sign, and it's also fixed water. So like Cancer is cardinal water. It's water that initiates. It's like a rushing river or a rapids. Pisces is mutable water, water that transitions. I think a lot about like gas and steam and smoke and like precipitation, that like rain that turns to ice. Like Pisces is kind of that ever transforming, porous, now, magic trick. It's this thing, now it's this thing. Scorpio is the water at the bottom of a well. Scorpio is a lake that is like eerily calm at daybreak. Scorpio is water that is reflective. It's like a mirror. And in this sense, that it is the water that is mirror like, it's the water that is most mirror like in the zodiac. Scorpio is also where we are confronted, like both individually and also collectively, with what we find uncomfortable, with the parts of ourselves we don't like, with the parts of ourselves that we're scared of, with what is marginal, with what is taboo. And given that the predominance of particularly US centric, like from American astrologers, all of this discourse about how Scorpio is like hypersexual, the US is like one of the most puritanical, like developed countries in the entire world. The discomfort with sex here is so profound. So I don't find it surprising that Scorpio gets this sort of amalgamation of like sex and death and spooky stuff and, you know, all the things that people will dress up for as Halloween, but otherwise avoid dealing with in the rest of life. So to my mind, Scorpio is primarily concerned with compost and decay. So I guess like Meg would think that's sexy, but like I don't know that that's necessarily like the first adjective. I'm like, that's a very particular kind of person thinks that that's sexy. Like, it's, you know, compost decay, the trash compactor, like, again, like the descent, you know, the trials and tribulations, the road. Like, these are not overtly like sexy, pleasurable things. Yeah, in the Northern Hemisphere, this season comes in the middle of fall, right? So this is like the dying time. I'm looking out this window and like half of the leaves outside are orange or red. There are tons of leaves on the ground. Like birds are migrating. It's like, it's fall. It is fully fall. And so in this, I want to think a little bit about how observing the zodiacal seasons can invite us into a much deeper relationship with the world around us. And to me, Scorpio is one of the first times of year into fall, winter where I really feel that. Like to me, astrology is a mindfulness practice. And like it slows us down. It pushes us to look at the radical dissonance between what the astrology is doing and what nature is doing outside my window versus like what the colonialist Western culture I live in pushes me to do, which is work, 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 be a machine, no rest, no dying time for you, no time to process. Like you have to, you know, just be making, producing all the time. And the cycles of nature and of the seasons just are such medicine to, such obvious antithesis to capitalist hustle culture. And this is also a source of discomfort, I think, with the late fall and winter signs here in the Northern Hemisphere. They often get really twisted and perverted into capitalist friendly and capitalist affirming interpretations, like Capricorn is the CEO. We'll talk about that later when we're in Capricorn season. But one of the other twistings that happens is for a zodiacal season that comes after Scorpio to us on November 21st, is Sagittarius season begins. And I love Sag season. And Sag and people who have a Sag sun tend to get talked about as like the party animal, the party girl, like, you know, freedom seeking, no boundaries, no rules, all of that. But I think another way to look at it is that Sagittarius is the bonfire that encourages intellectual and philosophical and spiritual conversation, like that gathers everyone together for one last community, you know, celebration before the deep freeze of winter like really sets in. You know, if Scorpio is a doula, like for either birth or death, who helps us move through those transitions, then I think Sagittarius in many ways is a kind of priest. I know that word can be really loaded for people, but like it's, you know, the season that really also is continuing to slow us down to help us reflect, help us process, and help us make meaning. And I think the lunations this month really highlight that. They highlight the themes of compost and decay, especially. The new moon in Scorpio on November 1st sits with Mercury in Scorpio, like very closely. And so when Mercury is sitting with a new moon, that means that I'm going to expect a lot of talking, a lot of communicating about what we're putting out to pasture and like what initiatives we're pursuing on both individual and collective levels. And this energy coming right before the US presidential election is definitely a last minute burst of energy into like, what are we getting rid of? What are we initiating? Bea and I talked about that a little bit in our election episode. And so that new moon is just a really great time for announcing things or launching things that explicitly have to do with Scorpio themes. Challenging the taboo, taking us into the journey of grief, putting up a mirror to society's, abuses and harms. And then the full moon in Taurus on November 15th is sitting very, very close to, like, uncomfortably close to Uranus. So I would maybe not like do something super risky that day. And, whether like with the physical body or just like emotionally, collectively, it's a pretty volatile day. And again, that doesn't necessarily mean bad, but it does indicate that there will be some surprises, having to pivot pretty quick. I would expect surprises mid-month around that lunation. Uranus is the bringer of metaphorical earthquakes who like shakes up your life, and anything that isn't secured or bolted down or like built in an earthquake ready building is gonna get shaken up and moved around and maybe fall a little bit. And we'll talk more about the people who that lunation will primarily impact when we get to our buckets. But that is something to be aware of in case you are the kind of person who plans things around the lunar cycle. Two more things to get into the general overview of this month. So first, and this one is really huge, is that Pluto will re-enter Aquarius for good on November 19th. So like, right after that, really, let's shake everything up, full moon with Uranus. Then Pluto's like, let's have another journey. That will mark the end of the United States' Pluto return, which is partly why I'm thinking about this election as a kind of like capstone project for us. We'll see how that commentary ages once we've actually had the election. But Pluto has been dipping in and out of Aquarius, like kind of going back and forth between the very, very late degrees of Capricorn and very, very early degrees of Aquarius since early 2023. And now we're here and it's like ready to just full steam ahead in Aquarius, very literally for the next 20 years. So my fellow folks who have planets and points around those very early degrees of fixed signs, so like 0 Aquarius, your sun's at 1 degree Taurus, your Mercury's at 2 degrees Scorpio. Hello. I see you. Like, we're in for it. In my newsletter, I've written pretty extensively about Pluto and Aquarius's relationship to both revolution, because this was the last time Pluto was in Aquarius. We had the French Revolution. And then I've also written about Pluto and Aquarius's relationship to AI based on basically every news event around AI of 2023, around the time that transition was happening. Like ChatGPT exploded. There was that enormous letter written from like Google AI executives and so many others on the harms of artificial intelligence and their fear for where it was going. So I will link those in the show notes. And if you're wanting to know more about like what those early Pluto and Aquarius years might bring, I will also add that like Pluto moves so slow. So if you've got, say, your ascendant, your rising sign, or your sun or whatever is like at 15 degrees of Aquarius, it's not going to get there for like more than 10 years. So like, we don't need to freak out about the stuff that's further down. Pluto journeys are slow. It reveals itself over time. And the folks who will primarily be feeling this are, like I said, people who have, planets and points at like 0, 1, 2 of those fixed signs. And last but not least, last thing I want to flag for the month, Mercury stations retrograde in Sagittarius on November 25th. So end of month, holiday season, if you're traveling to see loved ones, if you're talking to family, like just be mindful that you schedule yourself a buffer. Again, this is stuff that you would ideally be doing anyway, but when we're traveling during Mercury retrograde, it's just like extra important. Double check that your airline tickets are for the correct date. Make sure your TSA pre-check or your global entry is already uploaded. Like, things are, again, these are always good to do, but we're just extra, crossing our T's and dotting our I's just to make travel as smooth as possible. Meg, what are the cards telling us?
The cards, as ever, are just affirming so many of the messages that y'all have talked about, which I really love going last in this little lineup because I think that it's so interesting to kind of wrap these things up with tarot. I also just have to say that as a November-born Scorpio with a birth number of 11, this all just feels very pointed. I know you're not talking to me, but also you kind of are. So, like, thank you for all of
This
the
whole
info.
episode is a direct attack on Meg.
Yeah, this is really just all about me. So thank you so much for centering me in your work. I really appreciate it.
Also about how Meg's just going to be really turned on all month. Like,
Just
super hot
nonstop.
for Ron.
How can I not be? Coming to you live from a kitchen in Iowa. But anyway, so today we are going to be looking at 3 cards as always. And I always like to start with our kind of general theme card, which as a reminder is much less, here is exactly what's going to happen to every single person who's listening to this month, and much more. Here is an energy to embrace, to be aware of, to work with, just offering a general vibe for what the month might be. This can also be like energy that might feel really good to engage with or to explore. This could be a card that you want to pull out of your deck and kind of meditate with or journal with or do readings with. But this just might be a card that you find really stimulating, so to speak, or really engaging or exciting or inspiring. And it plays right into a lot of the themes you both talked about, because our theme card for this month is the Two of Wands. Now, the Two of Wands is a really interesting card because 2 is this number that's kind of like reflective and contemplative and wants like balance and harmony. But Wands is associated with the element of fire, which is like, what if we burned it all down? What if we were moving? What if we light things up? What if we move as quickly as possible? And so even though the card doesn't have to be about friction, I think the Two of Wands always has a little bit of inherent friction within it, which can be a really fun thing to think about as we're at the beginning of these phases, both with the numerology that Bee was talking about, kind of being at the start of this cycle, but also thinking about these much bigger cycles of not just shifting from, Scorpio to Sagittarius, but this huge Pluto transit that we are, collectively moving through with Pluto finally moving into Aquarius. So I think that there's a lot to think about in terms of the Two of Wands, in terms of creative planning, intentional passion, and really a devotion to visioning out with care what we want to do and make and see and feel and be, not just in the moment, although that's important, but also starting to think about the long term. With the Two of Wands, I always think about deliberately trusting in our own sense of authenticity and really relying on our gut, because again, we're talking about wands and fire, relying on our gut and our instincts to move through a big choice or a pivotal decision. So you could say that the Two of Wands is a fiery crossroads. I also wrote about it earlier this year as being a glowing ember that we can use as a tool right now to start a larger fire, or that we can bank for a later time. And we really do have the opportunity to either feed that ember and let it glow and burn into something big that we're going to tend for the long term, or something that we want to kind of tuck away for our future self to be able to light up when we feel more resourced. So this really is an opportunity for commitment. It's not a requirement for commitment. This is a chance to trust in your desire, to have a relationship with your desire, with whatever is charging you, whatever is inspiring and motivating you, and to really be honest with yourself about what you are passionate about pursuing, not what you feel pressured to pursue, not what you feel like you should pursue, but what you actually want to devote yourself to. Now, because of this inherent tension and because of what 2 is just as a number, 2s can speak in the tarot to blockages or frustrations or obstacles. So I will say that if things feel unclear for you around a big decision or around a personal direction that you want to go, or a vision or dream or ambition, really give yourself time to chew on your options. I know fire wants to go, go, go. Fire wants to burn. Fire wants to blaze hot. And so that can feel really urgent, but just because you're eager to get moving doesn't mean you have to move. And it doesn't mean you have to make a choice just to have the choice be done with, right? So I really want to invite you to let yourself honor what matters to you, and to let yourself choose whatever you're going to do or not do from a place of wisdom and experience and authenticity, rather than impatience or frustration or aggravation. So just generally, as a theme for this month, I would say that the Two of Wands wants you to pay attention to how you make the choices that are important to you. Again, not to other people, not to your partner, not to your boss, not to your kids, not to your neighbors, not to whatever political party you're in, but to you. How does your passion and your creativity and your drive and your sense of purpose really play into your choices and impact your choices? Also, what lights you up? How can you let that take up more space, right? What does it mean to feed your fire? And if last month felt like an initiation of sorts, if you really were feeling that one energy, how can this month serve as a time of clarification around what your goals and dreams really are and what is motivating those goals and dreams forward? Okay. So moving on to our truth card, which again is an opportunity for internal discovery, something to reflect on, something to play around with or explore within yourself. Our truth card is the Six of Swords, which I think is cute for a lot of reasons. I think of the Six of Swords as a really transitional energy. There's this sense of kind of harmony and observation and this pursuit of clarity that I always really feel in this card. Six has that sense of kind of flexibility and expansion. And with the suit of swords, which we associate with the element of air and with the mind, there's this sense of finding truth in kind of surprising or unexpected places. I used the Gamer Side deck this month, which is by Charlie Claire Burgess. And it's just one of my favorite decks to be working with. And in the guidebook, Charlie talks about the Six of Swords as awkward but beautiful growing pains, which I just felt was really appropriate. It feels like it's kind of the first tentative steps on the other side of a big decision or a major transition. Six is also a number of relationships. So I'm thinking about communities based around ideals and perspectives. But because this is a truth card and it's internal, I think this really invites us to think about how we are aligned with those we are collaborating with, or how our sense of truth meshes with, or perhaps comes in conflict even with those we are trying to build something with. So as our truth for the month, the Six of Swords makes me think about the pride that comes after a difficult choice or a really hard-won bit of freedom. The ways that we are learning to stand on wobbly legs and smile bravely into whatever new chapter of this adventure we're moving into. This is really like taking responsibility for our own sense of discernment and noting how the things that we say or the ideals that we are aligning ourselves with actually have an impact on those who are looking at us for guidance and assurance and insight. So this month, ask yourself, what transition are you moving through? And what does that movement actually look like? What does it mean for you? What is gradually becoming more clear for you? And also, how can you embrace that clarity instead of feeling uncomfortable with it or trying to shy away from it or avoid it, right? I think the Six of Swords is a very clear-eyed kind of energy. Also, how are you adapting or expanding your ideas or the direction that you're moving in a way that feels empowering rather than sacrificial? Right? We're not asking you to be a martyr here. How can you be really true to what feels true for you in this present moment? Not your past self, but your present self. Again, like B, you were saying. Who is with you as well? Thinking about community. Who's with you in terms of ideals and perspectives and intentionality? Whose discernment do you trust? And also, because Six has that reciprocity, who is looking to you for clarity? Who trusts you and your discernment? And what does that mean in terms of community? Our final card for this month is the Dare card, which is, you can really think of this as an external opportunity. So something to do, something to test, a risk to take, or an ambition to pursue, or something to do in your external world. And our Dare card is the only major for this month. It's the Chariot, which I kind of, again, love as the sense of, focusing on the self, listening to the self, authenticity, choice, and moving with discernment and deliberation. So I think about the Chariot as really reckoning with what is authentic for us and making a commitment to pursuing that thing, even if it means we have to make a new blueprint for how we're going to pursue that thing. Okay. So the Chariot can be considering how our goals are going to be accomplished, how we're going to direct our passions, and also thinking about the structures that exist that support our work, as well as the structures that exist that are kind of getting in the way of our work or impeding our sense of progress. I like to think about sevens in general, but the Chariot in particular as breakthrough, right? Seven to me feels like breakthrough energy. So this could be breaking away from what feels safe in pursuit of what feels true. This could be trusting in our own authority instead of always deferring to the authority of other people or larger systems or structures. This could be balancing necessity with desire. There's a lot of ways that this might manifest for you as a Dare for this month. And so there's a lot of things that this might look like for you. So I'm not going to prescribe what your Dare is for the Chariot, but I will say this month, listen to your gut. Don't rush decisions based on someone else's timeline, but instead make them from a place of your own deep authenticity. A lot of similarities with the Two of Wands here. But also, don't be afraid to break some rules and fuck some shit up, right? Trust in your own direction and make choices that really resonate for you, not for other people. This could be a spiritual breakthrough because 7 is that spiritual number, that spiritual seeker, that always asking questions. So if you find yourself constantly asking questions around where you're tired of being confined, where you feel restricted or held back, where you feel like something's always getting in your way, or where you might be getting in your own way, my dare for you is to unpack that a little bit, is to not be not like flinch away from that, but to really examine it closely. So just a really lighthearted set of cards. Just really, really easeful, easy work here.
Yeah, no biggie for November.
Super chill, super chill. Resident Scorpio reporting for duty. Like,
Because Meg is so hot, actually, because this living room is so hot. But
oh
because
no.
Meg, we'll say it's because Meg is so hot, I'm going to take my
Yeah,
sweatshirt off.
great, perfect. Love that.
Yes, a little show for the YouTube people.
I need some water, Jesus.
Saucy, spicy Coven. Spicy Coven.
Spicy Coven after dark.
Speaking of sexiness and how it is not related to Scorpio, but that's my terrible transition. When you both were talking, I was thinking about how Scorpio is so much really, because you were saying, especially be like about, November being an 11 but we're still in the 8 because of the year. And like, there's kind of a tension there. And I'm like, oh yeah, Scorpio's the 8th zodiacal sign. It's the 8th zodiacal season. Like, yeah, the way that you've been talking about 8 is the ordeal that we're in this year. And it's like that just like kind of comes to a like head during Scorpio season. It's kind of funny.
Yeah, totally makes sense though.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's really interesting that our numbers are 1, 2, and 11 in a month that really highlights 8 and its themes, because it seems a bit incongruous to me, that we would be in like the deep waters. But actually, what kept coming up for me when I was listening to both of you talk was this idea that we all have talked about reflection and the idea of the mirror, and how November and Scorpio and 11 and 2 of Wands and all of these cards are really going to have us looking in the mirror and taking a real, hard, good, sexy look at ourselves. This doesn't just have to be an underworld journey, but of course that is part of reflection, and that is part of seeing ourselves clearly. And so, yeah, I think there's a lot of balance here between like what is still murky and what is coming into light and what is clear to us. So I see so many similarities across the cards and the zodiacal season and the numbers for sure.
Yeah, I'm really glad you put it that way, B, because I feel like when we talk about like taking a good hard look at yourself and like being really honest with yourself, I feel like at least my perhaps pessimistic brain tends to go to, I got to be real with myself about my flaws and my blind spots and like the parts of me that need growth and development. But I do feel like there really is also the flip side of that, of like, where can you actually own the things that you're good at and stop, deflecting compliments or pretending that this thing you're good at is not a thing you're good at, or denying your gifts or trying to hide your light or whatever. Like, I think that can be just as uncomfortable in a lot of ways. But it's also just as important to be real too about like, what gifts can I bring to, this work or to my relationships or to my community, or like to the revolution, to future planning for whatever our world is going to look like in a couple of years, really being real about what gifts can I bring, as well as what do I need to unpack about my own internalized bullshit or whatever.
Hide it under a bushel. No,
I was trying not to. I wrote a whole essay about that earlier this year, and I felt guilty for weeks. I was like, what an awful earworm to give people.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm not sorry. It's just like, it's,
You're not sorry.
it's right there. Except the thing that we're not hiding is not, what's good about someone else or about another deity or whatever. It's like, what's good about ourselves.
Yeah.
And how much do we veil that from ourselves? It's so interesting this time to be talking about this time of year, because like I have so many feelings about when people are like the timeline jumping stuff or the veil is thin. I'm like,
I'm not gonna lie,
I
I barely
find
know what people mean when they say that shit. I'm like, what is timeline jumping? What does that even mean? And do I need to worry about this? Like,
Well, and
it always
also
feels very,
yeah, but like also like when is a veil ever not thin?
I know.
that's the
If it's a
thing.
veil, it's a veil.
Like if we're brought into a relationship with the world around us, with the land, with spirit, with whoever you call, whatever you call God, but like there's so many non-deity spirits around us. Like if you're remotely attuned to any of that, like it always, I'm just gonna be like Whoopi Goldberg and the Brandy Cinderella over here, being like just squeaking because I can't speak because I'm like it's so obvious. Like we know the veil is not more thin; it's not less thin. It's just always there. And maybe this is the time of year when, because nature is dying, we're actually paying attention to like death and decay and compost. Goth girly pops, genderless, unite.
Yeah, well, and I think too, something about this time of year, we have access to this information in a way that, like, if nature is slowing down, we are also slowing down.
Mhm.
So there's less output for us to focus on and more
Mm,
quiet time. And that's
Mhm.
actually what allows the spiritual insights and the inspirations and the creative
Mhm.
ideas and the communication to actually come through
Mhm.
because it can't always come through when things are so busy and so loud and moving.
yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
No, I super love that. It made me, and that makes me think too of how like Meg, oh my God, the fact that the Six of Swords and the Chariot are the truth dare pairing, that's so
I
fucking
know.
funny.
Can you believe
Um,
it?
but what you were saying about discernment, like we've talked a lot
Mhm.
about discernment together this year, that
Yeah.
like what you were saying with the Six of Swords, like being that like, okay, we're in a new cycle, we're in the ordeal, we're in the depth of Scorpio, we're in the liminality of the ideal and the perhaps rose-colored glasses of the 11. Like what discernment are you putting in your backpack? I don't know. I'm trying to mix too many
No, I
things.
like that. Like discernment is a resource. Like it is a tool, it is a skill, it is a talent, it is an ability, it is a thing you have to cultivate and keep investing in just like so many other resources. Like you have to sharpen your knife or it's not, it's going to get dull eventually. You have to regularly care for it so that it can actually cut through shit.
Yeah. And also, I didn't talk about this, but Scorpio is ruled by Mars in traditional, like reconstructed Neo Hellenistic astrology, which is what I practice. And so, Scorpio is also a time for, even though we're sitting like and sifting through the watery, like muck at the bottom of the well, it's also like Mars is the knife, and Mars is what separates and what cleaves and what sorts. Venus is lube moon, Mars is knife moon. I don't know.
Meg, when you were talking about desire and
Mhm.
wanting, especially with the Two of Wands and in an eight collective year, we have talked before about centering our desires.
Mhm.
And I think that continues to be really so key because not only, well, first of all, 11 is like, yeah, what if you dared to dream that what you wanted could actually come true? What if you
Mhm.
just let yourself go hog wild and figure out like what is the most perfect manifestation of whatever it is that you want? And
Mhm.
then how can you practically, with boots on the ground, start to get there? But I
Mhm.
think, yeah, the desire, especially with one being our core energy, like this is new. And so we have to do things differently in order to make change.
Mhm.
And we also have to enjoy what we're doing because that's how we show up wholeheartedly. It's like when people tell writers that if you're not enjoying the writing process, a reader can tell that this is not, you didn't find this very fun. Like it changes the quality of the output. And I
Mhm.
think, especially where we are collectively and what we need to move forward, we do need to be showing up in ways that we really want to be showing up in and like doing work that we really want to be doing because that's going to pack the most punch and we need everyone to show up.
Me too.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. It's also occurring to me as part of this conversation that like all of these cards feel pretty courageous to me. Like they feel like brave cards, and I do think that that's really true and necessary when you're starting a new thing and you have to rethink it in a new way, or you have to approach it from a different direction, or use different tools to accomplish this new goal, that requires courage. It's easier to do what we always know how to do. It's easier to follow a path someone else has carved than it is to carve our own. So I do think that this like truth dare pairing is really empowering from that sense as well, because these are cards that don't flinch away from truth and are really willing to kind of get in there and do the hard thing, or make the complicated plan, or yeah, just be brave in specific ways that I think we could all use a little courage right now. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. All right. Should we get into some buckets?
Let's do
Let's
our
get into
bucket.
All
climb into
right.
the buckets.
As always, for our buckets, we're going to go through finance, home, love, and health. And again, we are going to highlight some individual personal numbers or rising signs that will be affected, or how they go with the tarot cards that were pulled. But of course, these are all taken with a grain of salt through our witchy lenses, not our accountant, construction, therapist, doctor lenses, which I definitely don't have. But okay, starting with finance. 11 energy, we've talked about rose-colored glasses. So we just need to be aware, all of us this month, that in terms of finances, if it seems too good to be true, like if it's this crazy deal, it might actually be too good to be true. We need to look a little bit closer, take a closer look at some stuff before agreeing. And especially for those in 8 or 9 months who are at the end of the spiral, where we are hanging out in 1 and 2 at the beginning of the spiral, you might feel the urge to act really quickly on an offer. Like I see an infomercial, like call now, or this deal will go away forever. And it's like, we can't be caught up in that this month. We need to take our time. We need to read the fine print. Again, especially as Mercury goes retrograde or heads into its shadow period. And another thing that came through was like, there are no real get rich quick schemes in the world, though I do hope that we'll all experience some kind of 11 miraculous windfall. So if you are manifesting money, be really specific with naming your ideal situation or outcome, and always affirm this or something better. Because sometimes with 11, we can't actually imagine what would be really amazing for us, or we have a hard time touching in with the most ideal outcome. So we can say, this is what I want, or something better. And then lastly, really pay yourself first this month. So if you are a person, I am speaking for myself as well, who is self-employed or runs a small business, it's not always easy to pay yourself first, especially if you're really struggling to make ends meet, but small amounts really add up. So right now, while listening to this, if you can add 50 cents to a savings account, great. Let it be small, but really pay yourself first in whatever way that you can, because again, the small actions will ripple into bigger actions over time. So no excuses. We're all saving.
I love that. I love that advice. I have there's actually a lot to do with finances this month, kind of on a collective general level. That's not always the case for astrology. But just to cover the 2 lunations first and who they're really going to impact in terms of money. Libra risings, that new moon in Scorpio is landing in your second house of personal finances and resources. Communication is your friend. Again, this is a new moon that's initiating Scorpio-like things. It sits with Mercury. So if you're asking for a raise, if you're interviewing for a new job, if you're wanting to put out feelers, I really strongly, I'm just really coming out with all my hot takes. Damn. I really strongly dislike the idea of manifestation that's like, if I just tell spirit and wish hard enough, it's like, no. Sometimes that will work, sure. But generally, manifestation is a collaborative experience in which we are doing the boots on the ground, physical, tangible, practical shit in the real world, in addition to the spiritual work. And that is this new moon for Libra risings. Hard to be able to find a new job through your network if you haven't told anyone that you're looking. So we are just remembering the practical, just talk about it. No shame, put the shame aside, just, ask about what you want, go for what you want. Aries risings. This full moon in Taurus on November 15th is what's going to impact your personal finances and resources. Again, given that Uranus is sitting on this moon, I would not make any particularly large purchases at this time. This has big, like, getting hit with an unexpected bill kind of energy, you know? And here in the US, I will say, like, November 15th is close enough to Black Friday that I doubt folks would be looking at really major purchases that are going to be discounted steeply 2 weeks later. But just be extra cautious, extra mindful. We're saving over spending in line with what B said. And generally for, the collective when it comes to money, on November 12th, Mercury, which in addition to ruling communication, writing, all that good stuff and travel, also is in charge of commerce and like small business. And Mercury is square Saturn, which it can be like a no, it can be discovering that there's a random restriction in zoning laws that you didn't know about because your county is super weird. So just, be mindful about pitching, signing contracts, putting in offers, read the fine print. And of course, with Mercury retrograde coming in at the end of November, be extra mindful around signing contracts. Be sure to check your bank statements for anything that's not supposed to be there, including just stuff that you canceled and then it didn't, get canceled. With Mercury retrograde, sometimes this is dramatic, and it's like, an entire airline like loses all of their bookings, Southwest. But most of the time, it's just stuff slipping through the cracks. Most of the time, it's just like, we forgot to add that thing to the calendar. So just, again, being super mindful. Meg, what about the tarot?
Well, I feel a little bit chaotic with this because I'm just looking at the cards I pulled and thinking about how both of you are urging a lot of caution and mindfulness. I will say that looking at these cards, I think there was like a little bit of a okay, but like, what if we fucked around a little bit? Energy here, there's just like a little bit of a willingness to take some risks, or at least the desire to take some risks. Whether or not you choose to do that is entirely up to you. Now, don't misunderstand me. I'm not trying to get sued here. It doesn't mean you need to go hog wild and do all the riskiest financial things you can think of. I'm not telling you to do that. I'm certainly not going to do that. But what I do want to say is that if something cool comes up, take your time to actually think about if it's going to be a good fit, if it seems legit, if it makes sense for you in this particular moment. You do your due diligence and it all feels good and someone else verifies that it looks good, could be worth a try. Just saying. Just maybe don't get pressured into doing anything with your money that doesn't line up with your values or goals, especially if it's someone putting pressure on you to act really quickly. That's not going to be the way. So let's not do that.
All right, so for home this month, I really felt like hearkening back to those 11 questions of where do you feel safe and brave and able to take up space. So this month, when we're thinking about home more conceptually, think about where do you feel at home? Is it in your body? Is it in a space? Is it in your community? With whom makes you feel at home? And what would be the ideal conditions for you to be able to practice coming home to yourself? What do you need to do in order to find and hold your center? Again, a lot of themes about being your own authority, standing on your own 2 feet, these kinds of questions. And like, where can you do that in a way that feels safe and brave? I do also see in a less conceptual, more literal sense that issues of personal or shared space could be highlighted this month, especially for those in 1 or 2 personal months where your energy is getting doubled. So maybe this means that you are moving in with a partner, you're finding new roommates, you're combining living spaces, maybe you're moving back home to live with family or parents, whatever that means. But then also maybe this means that within your current living situation, you need to carve out more of a physical space for yourself to be in. I know with COVID, a lot of us went home and like never left again. And now we share space with our loved ones. So this month, conceptually, where do you feel at home? But then also if your living situation is shifting or has shifted, how can you make it a little bit more comfortable for yourself? And yeah, get some quiet private time.
That makes a lot of sense. That feels very resonant, I think, for where Meg and I are right now, too. So I'm just going to like personally take that for November. Separate time is good. So for home, for astrology, I just looked at folks who are having the very literal physical home is a physical space, home is a dwelling lit up for November. Leo risings, new moon lands here for you. I'm going to sound like a broken record, but this new moon really is affirming that like whatever leaf you're turning over in your home life, whether again it's like it's moving in, it's moving out, you're renovating, you're having kids, like whatever it is, just talk about it. Like whatever stress is coming up, talk about it, clarify it. If you are doing things like with new roommates or business partners, like and you're signing a lease together or stuff like that, because real estate can live here too, like make sure again that everything is laid out in a contract, in an agreement, like everyone's responsibilities, what everyone's getting paid. We're just really underlining all of that right now. We're also not burying feelings in the well. Again, it's November, it's also holiday season here in the US, and so it really kind of kickstarts a prolonged period, no matter of what your family dynamic is, like what your family history is, like it's just a very tender season for a lot of people, and important for all of us to communicate our feelings. But Leo risings, it's super highlighted for you. Aquarius risings, this full moon in Taurus on November 15th might bring up a surprise in relation to your home, family, heritage. This could connect to events that were happening around May 7th when we had a new moon in Taurus. So, like, if you started thinking about moving back then, or thinking about looking more into like your heritage or your grandmother's past, or what, insert something here, like, and that is starting to come up again, then like right on time. Full moon is the first like big arc in the completion of a cycle initiated on a new moon. So maybe expect an update, a bit of news, a random DNA match on ancestry.com. I don't know. We'll find out. So that's you know what I will also add? Virgo risings, the Mercury retrograde in September is hitting your fourth house of home and family. So like miscommunications, like talk about it, clarify, text people, set clear deadlines, make a fucking short chart, like make it as explicit and real and concrete as possible to avoid those missed communications and such.
Cool. Well, I was thinking about finding things that spark joy in your home and literally letting them take up space. So I was on a different planet, I guess. But
No, I
I was
think it's great that, sorry, Meg, I'm interrupting you.
What?
I think it's
No,
really great that we're having a forecast where like B and I are kind of in one place and you're like, nope, the cards want to say something else.
you're like the
Like, I
card
think
reading
that's
there.
really cool and really helpful too.
Okay, good. Yeah, I was thinking about like bringing in a bold piece of artwork that you've been really wanting. I was thinking a lot about like desire and the ways that we like try to make our homes feel like, I don't know, like look a certain way that like our mom would be proud of, even if our mom doesn't live there, or like following design rules that actually don't speak to us or sing to us, and letting this be an opportunity to kind of break some of those rules. So yeah, I was thinking about like if you've been wanting a particular painting, or to paint your bathroom a particular color, or to put some like really fun wallpaper on the ceiling of your powder room, or to like, I don't know, install a funky doorknob that you found at this vintage shop. I'm just thinking about like little fun opportunities to break the rules that just really sing to you, but aren't necessarily going to be renovating your entire house, or like be something that, whoever you live with is going to be like, what the fuck are you doing? But like bringing something really fun in that just really satisfies you in a really lovely way, even if it's something that's like a painting that you could hang up for a little bit and live with for a while. And then if you're like, oh, okay, actually, like, I'm really glad I tried this, but it doesn't feel great in this space, you can just take it down and it's not like you knock down a wall or something. But that's kind of what I was thinking about in terms of home, is just don't be afraid to experiment with adding in a color or a texture, or doing something that you've really wanted to try. This might be a good time to test it out and see how it feels.
Yeah. I actually don't think that's standing at the opposite of what I was thinking about too. Like
Yeah.
I was talking about more conceptually what makes you feel at home, but that
Yeah.
can be literal. Like if what
Mhm.
makes you feel at home is to install that doorknob or have that really great painting, like do
Yeah.
it. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It also reminds me of a conversation that was happening in Gina's Discord, Astrology for Writers Discord, not to like put anyone on blast, but there was this conversation about how people have been turning to minimalism because it's easier to sell your house with minimal
Yes.
stuff than like for maximalism. But actually, how sad that is that we're all paring ourselves down to minimalism again because it makes it more marketable later.
Yeah.
So I love this break the rules, like
No,
paint the
thank you
thing.
for bridging that gap, because I know I read that conversation and had big feelings about it. I have a previous life as an interior designer, clearly, because I've like done work in that space before. But like, yeah, I think that feeling like you have to restrain yourself and like paint all the walls beige and like that's the only thing you're allowed to do because in 20 years it might change the resale value of your house. Like, Lord above, like life's too short. Like let your house be a place that you love, that you can come home to, that you feel safe in, that like reflects who you are and like just brings you a lot of joy. When you walk in the door, I want you to feel like, oh, I'm home, I can be myself. And look, there's my silly little dinosaur painting that makes me so happy, or like, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That kind of is a good place to jump into love.
Dinosaurs.
Honestly, the first thing that I wrote is put yourself first this month in
Well,
terms of love and relationships. Go after what it is that you want. Like, be the most maximal version. Is that a word? Maximal?
it is now.
It is now. Be that big version of yourself. And especially if you're in a 5, 6, or 7 personal month. So these are folks right in the middle and like moving into the back end of the spiral. Try making the first move this month or putting yourself in new scenarios or in front of new people, or let yourself move forward even if you don't have total clarity or all of the answers about someone or a situation. Like, just take a few steps down the path and see what happens. But overall, again, with this 11 energy, and I promise I'm not shitting on 11, but do not mistake fantasy for reality this month. So some things might feel like they just click. You might meet someone and it's like immediate. I mean, bunch of lesbians in the room. We don't have to talk about how quickly we all are like, we're in love, because it's intoxicating. Like, it feels really good. But in November, words and actions must align. So give yourself time to let the puzzle pieces come together. It doesn't mean that you're not moving forward, but it just means maybe we commit next month after some time has passed. We're not going on one date with someone and then moving in. Sorry, queer couples everywhere. And also, existing couples might be examining attachment styles this month. So again, the self and the other, we have 1 and 2 energy. So there is real sweetness here and real opportunity to connect or reconnect in a way that maybe you've been missing in an existing relationship. This could also mean friendship or other platonic relationship or collaborators as well, if like something's gone off the rails and you need to re-sweeten the pot. But also there is an opportunity here to change up outdated dynamics. So if you are somebody that's going through looking at attachment styles, looking at how healthful the relationship is, what's yours, what's mine, how do we connect? Just gentle movement.
That is remarkably resonant with the astrology. September was super romantic. October was super not romantic. And November is like kind of a Goldilocks, I think, somewhere in the middle. I've got one good day and one, not to use the good bad, I actually really don't like that. But like, I've got one day that's really supportive for romance and connection, and one where we are just going to want to be mindful. We start the month, incidentally, if you'd like to get your kicks before election day here in the US, have a really good, great, flirty, fun date night on November 3rd. Venus is in adventurous, passionate Sagittarius and is opposite super curious Jupiter in Gemini. So like, it's so funny Beat said that about the U-hauling, because there's definitely potential for a first date that goes overboard and turns into like a first weekend together. Lesbians, my fellow lesbians, I'm looking at you. Or, alternately, maybe you and your partner, you and your bestie, whoever, just like go out and do something that you've never tried before, like ice skating or, something in the bedroom. Like, it's a very supportive night, day, whole situation for exploration, adventure, connection. That's just like yeah, fun, flirty, early relationship vibes. And that's really nice to have. That's nice to see. The next week, we have to be a little more mindful because on November 9th, which as you were talking about 11s and relationships be, I was like, oh my God, November 9th is an 11 day. Like, right?
Yes.
Am I doing
Yeah,
that
yeah,
right? Like
yeah.
it's
You
also
are.
just an 11 day. But November 9th of this year, we have Venus in a square, which is like kind of a 90-degree angle. We're butting heads. We aren't seeing each other. Square Neptune moment. Venus Neptune days are really hard because it's very easy to like let the rose colored glasses just like merge onto the face like you're in the spring court in Akatar. We want to be careful about falling for our version of an ideal self that someone else has. Like you like the idea. God, how many butches have I dated that it was like I liked the idea of who they were, but it was a projection. It was my own shit. That is the kind of day, and again, that can happen anytime, not just on Venus Neptune days, but like that's the kind of energy we're wanting to be really aware of, really mindful of, and really like let's not wait for someone to get their act together. Like if it's been 3 months and it's not together, it's not going to get any better. So that's my advice.
Okay. So perhaps unsurprisingly, given what B and Gina have already shared, this month's cards to me have big, what if you just fell in love with yourself energy? Like, what if you choose yourself kind of energy? Taking yourself on dates, loving yourself, masturbating, doing the long, luxurious bathtub thing, doing things that make you feel really good and sexy and powerful. Again, maybe making moves or just making choices that prioritize your desire, whatever your desire is like aimed at or looking for. But again, resisting the urge to just defer to the status quo and instead really asking for what you need, both from your friends and partners, but also just owning your own desire in a way that's free from shame. Lean into the erotic, lean into the fire, enjoy the purpose and intentionality in these cards. And also, I was thinking, something else that feel like it came through was don't get too ahead of yourself. So the U-hauling conversation, yes to all of this. Like stay present, enjoy what's happening in the moment, enjoy the sex you're having right now instead of, thinking about what sex is going to be like in 10 years, right? Just like be present and enjoy the present and let that be the thing that's fulfilling you right now instead of worrying too much about what's going to happen next or all the things you can't control.
Preach. Okay. Health. Here we are in November. One is big Spitfire energy. Okay. So in November, we are focusing on what kinds of preparation are going to keep us healthy and safe while we are making moves. So this is the energy of do not run without stretching first. Don't overexert when you have an injury, talking to myself and only myself. It's like if we go too fast out of the gate, we could get hurt, and that will actually put us even farther behind the mark than we want to be. So, really, for November and overall health, not just exercise or movement, it's okay that you are where you are. Wherever you are right now, this is a starting place. So there is some kind of just do it, just start Nike energy here, but we're going at a proper pace for a beginner or wherever it is that we are. And this is especially true for those in a 3 or 4 personal month because you're going to be feeling a beat or two ahead of the collective energy, right? If we're in 1 and 2, you're in 3 and 4. Like it could feel frustrating or like you're being held back a little bit or that you want to move faster, you want to go farther, whatever it is. But here, again, we're going bit by bit. And especially with this 8 collective year, we are building stamina. So if you feel depleted, rest. And sometimes 8 being strength, it reveals to us where we're just not that strong, where we are feeling weaker, where we are not feeling as well as maybe we have been in the past. So that can be really disappointing. But again, kind of just being where you are and saying, okay, this might suck for right now, or I wish I were somewhere else. But you can start from exactly where you are.
On that note, some days to be mindful of here in November. And these are a little similar to last month, but it just still is really intense. So I'm going to kind of just stay there. Whereas last month I was really highlighting the moon opposite Mars on the Cancer Capricorn axis because the moon was sitting with Pluto, which was still in Capricorn. In November, we have the same planetary setup, except we've shifted to Leo and Aquarius. So the moon, and in this case, the moon is going to be with Mars in Leo, and then that'll be opposing Pluto in Aquarius. So what does this mean? Moon Mars, honestly, very similar to be like there's a high potential for accidents because the moon in this kind of chart, the moon is very literally the body. Mars, especially when it's in a fire sign like Leo, can be moving a little more quickly, prone to overheating. This is like classic, you slip with a knife when you're paring vegetables. And it's just that kind of, simple, but not so simple, like very classic, blunder that results in a little trip to the ER or that kind of thing. And so if something happens, that is to say, go to the hospital. Like, don't try to bandage over something that needs stitches. The overall medicine here is slow down, like slow down. And don't, again, we're moving from that like Capricorn Cancer axis that we had last month to like Leo Aquarius. And that fire and air is like, baby, let's go. Like, let's move. We're, again, going to be really mindful and start slow when, I don't know, you're going to an axe throwing bachelorette party. Just being very tender and gentle. And we're, especially for those of us who now creak and randomly like strain and like sprain things when we get out of bed in the morning, we're especially being careful. So that's my little bit for the health.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, unsurprisingly, the cards are actually really echoing this. I think the cards this month really speak to that desire to rush and to take the next step and do the next thing and to move quickly. And there's kind of an impatience with these cards in some ways to choose, to empower, to move, to change, to do the thing. But when it comes to your health, moving with intention is generally where we want to be. So I would say, just to echo what Bea and Jeanna have said, if you find yourself pushing really hard, maybe wonder, why am I doing this? Can I actually slow down? Can I take a breath? Can I care for my body? I think that the cards are really indicating that risks are going to feel really good this month, but that doesn't actually mean that you have to take all of the risks and that you definitely don't have to do all the risky things you can think of, especially when it comes to your health. So yeah, slow down. It's not a race. Whatever it is, it's probably not a race. And even if it is, you don't have to win the race. You can just participate, listen to your body, honor your needs, and don't push harder than you need to, because it could cause some problems down the line. And we don't want that for you.
And don't go bungee jumping on November 20th or 21st.
Don't go bungee jumping on those specific days.
Don't go like free diving without your scuba tank. Don't do all these nonsense things I see people on TikTokies doing. We aren't doing that. We are being nanas. We are being careful.
We are welcoming the winter months here at Hag Crone Coven. Yeah. Okay, well, that is everything. And November, y'all. I'm really curious to see, honestly, especially maybe it's just because of the election, but much, much more. I am really curious to see how this all shakes out and how listening back to this towards the end of the month, how this will all read. I think of all the forecasts we've done, I'm like the most curious about this one.
Yeah, and like obviously Bea and I got into election stuff a lot more in depth than the episode we did about the election. So like go listen to that. But also I do think that like so much of what we've been talking about this collective, like there's the urge to go fast, but we have to slow down. Like so applies to how all of us are going to be engaging or not, engaging, not engaging in the political sphere, in whether that's like protest, posting on social media. Like this has really big put your phone down like and go touch grass energy, especially when the news is going to be like ramping, like really just getting into all of our anxieties and worries. So yeah,
that makes me think about 11, how imagination might actually be a really good antidote for us this month. It's like, especially because the powers that be do not want you to access your imagination. But 11 is like, actually, I would like to disassociate from this and spend some time up here. So new thought at the end of all of this. Like,
No, I
Yeah.
love that because that I do think imagination is so important for this space that we're in. I think so many of us are locked into like, well, it can only ever be this way. Like this is the
Mhm.
only way the world can ever exist. And it's like, no, baby, no, 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 no.
Yeah.
Like let your mind open up and imagine all the other ways we could do this because that's the start of hope and that's how we
Yeah.
actually build something new.
I mean, again, Pluto does enter Aquarius for good for the next 20
I'm
years
very
this month.
excited.
And, I studied women's political literature, women's political writing of the French Revolution when I was in my PhD program. And no one ever thought that a blood like monarchy would fall. No one ever thought that would happen in Europe. And then it did. And then it all got really messy and all the revolutionaries started killing each other and the Catholic Church got involved. And like then it got really messy and like made the way for a military dictatorship for a few decades. But like MBD, the point is no one thought that no one thought the ancien regime would fall. Like it was unthinkable that the divine right of kings was not so divine and not so
Mhm.
right. But like here we are hundreds of years later and we're like, obviously it's a fraught system. So yeah, imagination and the power of
totally.
Mhm,
Yeah,
mhm,
and beyond the world building too, like put your phone down and make some art, whatever
yeah.
that means to you. Like get into your imaginative space on a day-to-day basis and
mhm.
see what you can do. Because I think
Yeah.
that gets us into our hands, which is hands are ruled by the number two, feet are ruled by the number one. So we're like in our body,
Mhm.
walking, doing, making.
Yeah. I'm having like the really intense urge to recommend that people read N.K. Jemisin. So I'm just
Mm,
going to listen to that. Like,
mhm,
again, imagination, it's not nonfiction. It's like very much fantasy and sci fi. But like, in terms of imaginative world building, like decolonizing our world building, decolonizing our imaginations, I'm just going to throw out a general, like,
mhm,
the city
mhm.
we became duology, the fifth season, like all that stuff. So, yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. As always, please let us know what you liked, what was helpful, what you'd like to see more of, and do all of the things like subscribe, comment, rate, review. We've been loving the reviews. Thank you so much. We have a channel in our own personal Discord that's like nice things, and it makes us feel really nice. So
So lovely.
yeah, so thanks everyone for feedback. And then find us on social media. We are at Call Your Coven on Instagram. You can check out our website, callyourcoven.com. If you really like what you hear, you can support the podcast on Patreon. Again, right now, we are using our free tier as just a newsletter to let you know when new episodes drop. You can sign up for free, but then we also have a $5 supportive tier that actually doesn't have a ceiling. So if you want to support more, you can. But a $5 supportive tier that at the moment helps to reimburse us for the cost of creating the show. But like we've talked about, we are hoping to add perks later on. And I think in November, we might actually all have some space to talk about that.
Yeah.
So definitely, a good month to hop on our Patreon, like monthly Q&As, merch drops, special discounts, whatever. And then, of course, please tell your friends. The coven aspect of this does mean us, but it also means all of you. And it's been so joyful to see people, join and react and respond. So, again, we're just thrilled and sending everyone a lot of love, comfort, and protection for November. And then
Mhm.
we'll see you in December for the final month of 2024.
That sounds fake.
Yeah.
Wild. Absolutely wild. Crone
Amazing.
Coven unite.
Crone Coven does Yule.
See ya.
Bye.